Chapter 6. Adri. The sun was bearing down hard when Jill finally arrived home. Her left knee was smarting as dust from the road mixed with salty sweat and blood. In the driveway, Nana's station wagon with its faded wood paneling looked shabby next to a new, tan Chrysler coupe. Who's here? Jill wondered as she maneuvered her bicycle past the cars into the garage. Nana opened the kitchen door and called to her. "Come in, Jill. Wendy and her aunt are here to see you." She left the door open and went back into the house. Jill rolled her slacks down over her dusty legs. Her shirt was wringing wet with perspiration, and her hair clung to her face and neck in limp ringlets. She went into the kitchen where the tall ceiling captured the hot air and the living area, and left the living area cool and dry. Voices were coming from the sun porch. Hastily, she washed her face with the cold water from the stone sink and then went out to the porch. Wendy and her aunt were sitting on a sofa. Sarge was on the window seat, washing his face. "Where were you?" Nana asked, looking her over. "What happened?" "I had an accident with the bike." Jill pulled up the leg of her slacks and pointed to her scraped knee. "The tire blew out on a rock." "Oh, my goodness, that's too bad," Nana exclaimed, getting up to look more closely at Jill's knee. "I was afraid those tires wouldn't hold up. What a shame. Your first morning here and you get hurt." She went into the kitchen. "We must have passed you on the road," Wendy said. "Jill, I'd like you to meet my aunt, Adri Decker." "How do you do, Miss Decker?" Jill said to the pretty smiling woman. Jill noticed, except for the color of their eyes, Wendy's being turquoise and Adri's dark brown, there was a strong resemblance between the two, right down to that single dimple that appeared when they smiled. "Hello, Jill. We thought we'd come over to see you before the tea room opened," Miss Decker explained, glancing at her watch. She wore a rose-colored print dress with a white Peter Pan collar, which didn't look a bit childish. In fact, Jill imagined that this woman, like Wendy, could make any clothes look glamorous. Miss Decker spoke in a quiet voice with hardly a trace of a Maine accent. "We don't have a lot of customers this early in the season. It's when we have guests and serve 3 meals a day that it becomes hectic." Miss Decker looked Jill up and down, then held out her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jill. Please call me Adri. Most folks here in town use first names." "Thank you, Adri. It's nice to meet you, too." Jill shook Adri's hand and noticed that she was wearing a gold ring with a large red stone. "What a beautiful ring." "It is beautiful," Adri agreed. "It's a rare pigeon blood ruby, my July birthstone. It'll be Wendy's Sunday when I'm gone." "Say that!" Wendy exclaimed. "Don't ever talk about dying. I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you." Jill was startled at Wendy's reaction. Her aunt also seemed surprised. "I just meant that you're my only niece, my sister's daughter, and your birthday's in July, too." Wendy looked at the floor. I'm sorry. That's nice of you, Aunt Adri, to think of me. I wouldn't dream of leaving this ring to anyone else." Adri turned to Jill. "Jill, you have a strong resemblance to your famous father." "We think Jill looks very much like her beautiful mother," Nana called from the kitchen. "They both have those wonderful honey-colored eyes." Jill flushed. Yes, Mom was beautiful. She had a quiet royal bearing, yet she was fun, too. She and Dad loved going on surprise trips, treasure hunts, and stargazing picnics. Jill ached as she thought about her mother. She wished she were here. Adri interrupted Jill's thoughts. "Jill is quite pretty." Jill certainly didn't feel pretty, especially when Wendy was around. Today, Wendy wore a bright red and white striped shirt with a sailor collar and matching red tie. Her navy blue shorts matched her canvas shoes. Nana came back carrying a box of bandages and a bottle of iodine. "Too bad there was no one to help you when you fell." "I stopped for help at that little cottage down the road, the one with the birds." "Birds?" Nana asked as she knelt in front of Jill. "I don't know anyone with birds." She painted Jill's cut with iodine, then placed a bandage over it. "I knocked at the door, but no one answered, so I went out back to wash off my knee. A man came out of the house and yelled at me. He told me to leave the birds alone. He seemed to know who you were, Nana," said Jill, wincing as her wound began to sting. "Oh, yes. I think his name is Bishop. He's new around these parts," said Nana. "I hardly know him." "Clayton Bishop," Jill told her. "Don't have anything to do with him, Nana. He's pretty mean." Wendy's aunt straightened her dress around her knees. "Wendy, don't you want to make some plans with Jill? That's why you came out here." Jill thought she sounded annoyed. "Otherwise, let's head back now." "Can't you just leave me here?" asked Wendy. I can walk back later. It's still early, and I'll get back long before 2. Jill glanced over at her grandmother, who raised her eyebrows in a silent question. Jill nodded, and Nana said, "Do stay and visit Wendy. We'll have lunch, and then I'll drive you to the inn by 1 o'clock. Will that be all right?" she asked Adri. Adri got up to leave. "That will be fine. And Wendy, don't be a pest." Nana and the girls walked out to the driveway while Adri got into her car. "This car is a beauty. It's so streamlined, like a bullet," Nana said admiringly as she peeked into the front seat. "You were fortunate to get this before the government's ban on making new cars." "Luck was with me," Adri said through the open window. "Were you on a waiting list?" Nana asked. "Oh, yes." Adri seemed preoccupied as she started the engine. "Does this have that newfangled transmission I've been hearing about?" Nana called out. "Fluid drive?" Adri nodded and, looking over her shoulder, backed up the car. "Maybe I could drive it sometime," Wendy said eagerly. Adri waved as she drove off down the road, the dust billowing up behind her. "I'm going to make us a nice lunch," Nana said. "Can we help?" Jill asked. "Why don't you two go sit out on the rocks while I put things together? You can eat outside. I'll ring the bell when it's ready." Nana headed into the house. "Come on, Jill." "Come on." Jill, ignoring her throbbing knee, pulled Wendy by the hand. They crossed the lawn and climbed onto the rocks that jutted out toward the ocean, then stopped before reaching the place where the high tide came in and the rocks became green and slippery. "This is far enough." Jill settled down on a large flat boulder and put her sore leg out straight. "Look!" She reached into a crevasse that was filled with tidewater and pulled out a tiny snail. "Here's a periwinkle," she said, holding it out for Wendy to see. "Watch this." Jill began to sing an old Newfoundland verse her mother had taught her. "Periwinkle, periwinkle, show me your horns. If you don't, I'll kill your mother, father, sister, brother, and all you have belonging to you." "That's awful," Wendy complained. "It's cruel." "Shh. Whenever we go to the beach back home, we always do this. Watch." Jill held her mouth closer to the shell in her hand and sang the verse again softly. The hole where the shellfish was hiding slowly opened as the snail emerged, showing horn-like protrusions. "Holy moly! Look at that!" Wendy exclaimed. At the sound of her voice, the periwinkle pulled itself back into the shell. "You scared it." Jill replaced the snail into the little tide pool between the rocks. "I guess I bother everyone," Wendy complained, "even the snails." She looked out at the sea, and Jill wondered if she was about to cry. "I hope Aunt Adri doesn't think I'm a bother. She's usually nice to me, but sometimes I feel like I'm in the way. Did you hear her call me a pest?" Jill didn't know how to answer. Then she whispered, "You're not a pest, Wendy." The waves surged over the rocks beyond them, and gulls soared overhead. Jill recalled her grandmother describing how this whole point was covered with water during storms. After a long silence, Wendy suddenly spoke up. "Someone must like me. We found a beautiful bouquet of flowers on the doorstep this morning. It had a card addressed to me that said, 'Welcome to Winter Haven, Wendy. Have a wonderful vacation.'" "I got a bouquet, too." Jill noticed a flash of disappointment cross Wendy's face, and she almost regretted telling her. "Was there a name on your card?" "No, I have no idea who sent it." "Me neither," said Jill. "I thought it might be from the boy up here, who I think likes me." "I bet a lot of boys like you." Wendy nodded. "Yes, they do." "Where are you from, Wendy? Really?" "I'm from Upper New York State, a small town called Derry. You probably never heard of it." "What do your parents do?" "Well, as your grandmother told you, my dad runs a movie theater. He's too old to be in the service. He's in his 50s. How come your dad's not in the service? He looks young." "My dad has a bad ear. Would you believe it? I mean, here he is, a singer, and he has a bad ear. He had an ear operation once, and now he gets dizzy spells." "And then your dad's a 4F. He doesn't pass the physical, and that's why he's not in the army." Wendy looked thoughtful. "Beethoven became totally deaf. Imagine never being able to hear your own music." Wendy seemed to know a lot. "Tell me about your mother," Jill said. "Mom's never around. She's too busy with her clubs. She's always doing charity drives, and now they're making up bundles for Britain. You know, for people who lost everything in the bombings." Wendy rolled her eyes. "It's important, I guess, but sometimes I feel as if she's too busy to have me around. I heard Mom tell Dad, 'Why don't we send Wendy up to Adri's for the summer? It'll be good for both of them.' They never even asked me if I want to come. It was a fait accompli." Jill wondered what a fait accompli was, but decided not to ask. I kind of feel the same way, Jill confessed. My mother went off to Newfoundland, and she wouldn't take me. She's risking her life for her brother, my Uncle Cliff, and I honestly wonder if she cares more about him than she does about me. What about your dad? Couldn't you be with him? It'd be swell traveling around with your father and show business and everything. No, Dad won't take me on his tours. He said it wouldn't be safe for me to travel around the country. Jill picked up a shell and tossed it into the tide pool. I'll probably have to spend the whole summer here, or at least until my mom comes home. Well, we can have fun together. Maybe we can go shopping in Bayswater, Jill suggested, but you've already got lots of nice clothes. Wendy looked down at her smart outfit and seemed to brighten. Isn't this cute? Mom says it was nautical. Perfect thing for the seashore. Wendy's voice went into a snooty imitation of whom Jill assumed was her mother. So tell me about your aunt. What is she like? Isn't she beautiful? I wish I could look just like her. You do look like her, Jill said, except her eyes are brown. Oh, thank you, Jill. She's beautiful, Wendy said again. Wasn't that nice of her, telling me I could have her gorgeous ring someday? But I hope that day never comes. I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to Adri. I suppose it's an awful thing to say, but sometimes I wish she were my mother, even if she sometimes thinks I'm a pest. There was an awkward silence. Then Jill said, Adri's nice. She doesn't talk about herself much, Wendy said. She's mysterious, like that movie star Greta Garbo. Jill nodded. Well, I know someone who talks a lot. I met Corey MacDonald when I went down to find you at the inn. He said you had gone out with your aunt. He must have been watching for me. I thought he might have been the person who sent me the flowers. A quick smile crossed Wendy's face. Well, I'm sure he didn't send them to me. Still, he knew all about my mother going across the Gulf. He told me about the U-boats, and then he went on to warn me about saboteurs blowing up planes, as if I wasn't already worried. My dad takes planes all the time. A dumb thing to say. Wendy shrugged. Well, Query's outspoken. That's the way people are around here. But he's quite nice looking, don't you think? I didn't notice, Jill answered. He just made me so mad. Clang, clang. Jill jumped up. Nana's bell. Come on. I don't know about you. I'm starved. The girls sat at the picnic table out on the lawn, where Nana served up a platter of egg salad sandwiches, a bowl of potato chips, and a pitcher of frosty chocolate milk. I had the salad all made when I realized I was out of bread, Nana said as she handed each girl a plate. So I drove up to the grocery store. Jill helped herself to the chips. That was fast. Wendy, does your aunt know that new man, Clayton Bishop? Nana looked puzzled. I don't know. Why? Wendy asked. When we were talking about him this morning, she never mentioned that she knew him. Nana sat down on the picnic bench. I was a little curious about Clayton Bishop after hearing how nasty he was to Jill. So as I drove to the store, I looked more closely at his cottage. I could swear I caught a glimpse of Adri's Chrysler parked out in the back of the house.